Hi guys, and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. Thank you very much for coming back and checking out the channel. I hope you've been enjoying my videos. Really appreciate those who have been subscribing and liking. As you know, it really helps YouTubers out. So as someone who's just getting started, it's really helping out the channel, and I really appreciate your patronage. Today, we're going to be looking at freeipa. I've had several users ask me about this. They've been wanting a video to be made on it. Now, I've put it off for long enough, I reckon. And today we're just going to get involved, get stuck into it, get it installed, and show you how you can run your own LDAP server. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so you're thinking about having an LDAP server. Or maybe you have no idea what an LDAP server even is. No worries, that's what I'm here for. So an LDAP server, if I was to put my own description of it, is I want you to think about just a database with users, computers, / anything else inside of it. And that database gives authority to those users and those computers to be part of a domain, or an organization if you will, and provides them levels of access to certain things. For example, you can say computers in this group can have access to these parts of the domain, or these users can have access to these parts of the domain. You can restrict things and you can limit things using those groups and users. Now, if you're watching this and you're running a home business, you might be running a large business, you might even be running a corporation. You may or may not have heard of Windows Active Directory. It's everywhere, and it's quite common to see it in most organizations that use a Windows environment. If you're someone that works in an IT help desk or an IT environment, you've probably used it yourself and you're probably quite fluent with it. And I want to start this video by saying that I'm not here to tell you that one is better than the other, or that you should replace your existing setup with this, or vice versa. I'm here to simply show you how to install it and what it does, and you can make the decision for yourself. I've used both. I've been working in the IT industry for almost 10 years now, and I can assure you that I've used both here, and they both have different takes on user management and LDAP authentication. So let's look at freeipa as opposed to Windows Active Directory. In future, we can do a video on Active Directory, and we can look at more of the Windows environment. But today I want to show you how to install freeipa and operate it on Unraid. Now, freeipa is based on Linux, and it is for Linux environments when it comes to computers and users. However, that doesn't stop you using it if you want to use Windows computers, or you just want to use it for user authentication. And that's what makes it so special. Rather than setting up a Windows server, you can set up a freeipa server, which is open source, it's free, obviously, and it's trusted by millions of users around the world. However, you might struggle to find some documentation on it. And it took me quite a while to find some videos and find some advice before I actually implemented it for my own setup and my members at IBRACORP. So let's have a quick explanation here on freeipa. So it works with identity. Manage Linux users and client hosts in your realm, or a domain, for one central location. With the command line interface, web user interface, or RPC access. You can enable single sign-on authentication for all your systems, services, and applications. So that gives you your identity to say who you are as a user inside your organization or your home. Policies, you can define policies using Kerberos authentication and authorization policies for your identities. Control services like DNS, sudo, SC Linux, and AutoFS. So in this scenario, you're talking about what policies you want to apply for the authentication and authorization. So if you are not aware, authentication is who you are, identifying yourself. So when you set up an authentication, you are asking, who are you? Authorization is what you have access to. So I can authenticate and say, I am IBRACORP, and I am authorized to access these particular services thanks to these policies. And then you have other parts of it, just like mutual trust with other identity management systems like Microsoft Active Directory. So again, you can actually integrate this with Active Directory. Now, I'm not going to cover that. That's pretty advanced. And I don't know whether the person watching this is advanced or not. Considering it's not that common to hear about FreeIPA, it's probably better off we try and approach this from a little bit of a beginner understanding. And if in future people are interested, I can look at doing a advanced video and we can look at some of those features then. So guys, here's some of the main features. We'll quickly read them off. Integrated Security Information Management Solution. Built on top of well-known open source components and standard protocols. So again, I mean, that's one of the things we love here. If it's open source, many people know what's in it. You can look at any point in time and see what's happening inside that code. Full multi-master replication and extensible management interfaces. So if you're very strong with command line, you have that option, guys. If you prefer a web user interface, you have that option as well as these other ones, IPC and JSON. That's it in a nutshell. Now, reading this page, I can already feel your eyes telling me that you don't quite understand what that is really. I mean, what is that? So I've got my image here of a network, and it's actually my live environment, although I've stripped it of any real IP addresses, but I'll just bring it up for you so we can quickly have a look at that. Now, I know I'm talking a lot here, guys, and look, you got the chapters down below in the video. Feel free to skip if you like. I put them there for you so you can skip, but I really hope you would take a look at this because we can't just go and install it and not understand how it works. So anyway, here's the outlay of our network. So we have our internet, blah, blah, blah. We've already made videos on all this sort of stuff. From this point to this point, I have videos on there. Cloudflare, for example, comes through to our modem in the house, then to our router, then through Nginx Proxy Manager, which then comes down and a decision is made at this point. Now, realistically, this is actually inside an Nginx Proxy Manager, depending on the configuration that we have, whether it's protected or not. Now, if it is protected, it's redirected over to Authelia, which I also made a video on. Authelia then will decide, is the person that's trying to access this protected link authorized? Are they authenticated? Do we know who they are? What that will do will fire off to FreeIPA, and FreeIPA will then tell it, this person is a valid user. Send the request back. Authelia authenticates that person. Authenticated equals yes. Bang. We get access to whatever it is we have access to with our level of authorization. If we're not authenticated, it will send you back to Authelia and you'll just get bounced. So in my Authelia videos, we went through using file backends. Okay, using a file to store your users and their information. Now that makes sense in a test environment where you just want to test and make sure you can actually get Authelia working. But moving forward, that's not really the best approach. You're going to find that A, a file isn't very safe, even with hashing the passwords, and B, that file could be deleted, it could go missing. It's just really low standard. So instead we have our FreeiPA server, and that just basically lives there. It just stays there, storing information and authenticating those users. So from this workflow, I mean, you can see that all this stuff can be protected right at this level, right at the beginning, before they even get access to anything. All right, guys, with all that said, let's start the install, okay? So the first thing you're gonna do, if we were to use their instructions, okay, I'll put all these links down below, but there's plenty of different instructions. Now, I already know how to install it, so I'm just gonna show you how I like to install it. You have other options here, for example, different types of operating systems that you can pick from. You can do it on Docker as well. Now, I'm going to be very clear about this because some people will ask, why not just use a Docker container? Now, FreeIPA themselves and us here at IBRACORP, we love containers, we love Docker, but in this scenario, you don't really want to be running it in a Docker container. Why? That is not a forward-thinking, redundant plan. In fact, if I'm being quite honest, having it on a virtual machine is also not the best idea. So, I mean, in saying that, I probably should just eat my words. If you want to install it through Docker, I won't be going through that today, but you can follow the instructions there if you like. We're going to be going with a virtual machine. And the reason why I want to go with a virtual machine is because the best setup you can do is actually a standalone machine. And so if you're going to do it in a VM, it's going to be exactly the same if you were to then replicate that on a standalone computer. So my favorite OS for this scenario is actually Fedora. I really like their cockpit system where you can actually log into the server and have a web UI. So the first thing you want to do is download Fedora 33 server, or whatever it is, the version when you watch this video. Just make sure that it's supported by FreeIPA, and I know that Fedora 33 is supported. So using the 8664 architecture, we're going to download the standard ISO image. The next thing you want to do is copy your ISO image from wherever you just downloaded it and access your Unraid server. In my case, it's Pumbaa, and you want to put it in the ISOs folder. All right. If you don't see ISOs, if you go back to your server and you don't see ISOs in here, go back to your Unraid server and under shares, just make sure ISOs is there and the SMB is either public or if you have access, but you're just going to make sure that it's exported. So as you can see, it's exporting it so we can see it. So once you've got it in the ISOs folder, we're ready to continue. Head over to VMs, add a VM. In this case, we're using Fedora, so why not use the Fedora icon? Again, guys, we like to give a decent description, okay? Decent name and description so that we know what we're working with at a glance. So the name we're going to give it is FreeIPA. Description, we want it to have a static IP once we set it up. So as you can see, we've put the IP address that we want to give it. For the CPUs, in my scenario here, this is my test server that I use to make videos for you guys. So, you know, pick whatever's relevant for you, but just make sure that it's enough for the server. Same goes for the RAM. I'm just going to give it 4 gig of RAM. It probably doesn't really need that much, to be honest. Under ISOs, we'll just make sure we pick our Fedora server. We will probably give it a decent amount of size, probably 50 gig I think will suit fine. We don't need to map any shares through Unraid. Make sure your network bridge is BR0. Now, if you find that you're always changing this for VMs, you can change the default under the VM settings. If I just quickly go to settings here and under VM manager, you'll need to actually disable VMs, which we can do that, and switch to advanced view. And you'll see the default network bridge, I've set that to BR0. I think by default, Unraid will have virtual bridge, so the VIR one. I usually just switch it to BR0 because I use that so often, okay? Now what that means is you're exposing the VM directly out as if it was a machine on your local network, as opposed to a virtual machine inside of this Unraid server. But that depends on how you want it. If that's what works for you, then do it. Do it the way that works for you guys. That's the important thing, right? All right, with that done, so back to our VM template. We're happy with all this, guys. It looks pretty good. We don't need to change anything else. All the details look good. Now, I already know what IP address I'm going to give it thanks to this, so we'll just copy that for now. Scroll down and click create. Okay, so we have our FreeIPA server running now. And we'll VNC, left click and click on VNC remote. As you can see, it's already got our menu open, I'll just full screen that. And we want to install it. So you can test it as well. We just want to install. It should hopefully just start taking us through the wizard now. And here we go. So the first thing you'll notice with Fedora is it actually has a nice graphical installer right from the beginning. So pick your language and your region. Click continue. Okay, so anywhere with an exclamation mark is saying that it needs some attention and it needs you to intervene. Everything else is going to be automatic, okay? But there's a couple of things that we want to change. So first thing is the installation destination. So let's click on that. We're happy with that. That's our 50 gig that we've allocated. Storage is automatic. You can encrypt the data as well. So I'm not going to encrypt it in this case. If you're using this in a live environment, maybe it's a good idea. I'll leave that up to you. Click done. And you'll notice that that exclamation mark is now gone. Come over to network. And you can see we've got our network here. We've also have the option to change our host name. Now this is going to be really important. So the first thing we'll do is click configure. And under IPv4 settings, at the moment it's set to automatic. We want to set that to manual. So it's really important that you guys set a static address. Okay, we'll click add. And for our address, we'll put the one that we put in Unraid for the description of this VM. Automatically fills the net mask for us. And our gateway. DNS servers. I don't have a particular DNS server installed, so I always like to use the Cloudflare DNS. And we just leave it like that. And we can click save. So you see our DNS entries have taken, as well as our static IP address. So that's good. Now for our host name. So I probably should have explained this earlier, but in order to have FreeIPA work, you need a fully qualified domain name. Now, if you really wanted to, a lot of people, when they're testing this out, can actually put, you know, for example, whatever your domain is, IBRACORP.local. Or in this case, it's already localhost.local domain. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, if you already have a domain that you own, just set it to the domain that you own. And set it to the address that you think you would be accessing things from. So I'll give you an example here. We will say ipa.ibracorp.org. Now my main domain is ibracorp.io. I already have a service running through there, so I'm not going to bother putting that in, but this is our test service, which I use for videos. And we click apply. You can see it's changed our current host name. And that is now a fully qualified domain name, which is essential for FreeIPA. If you go back and watch my Cloudflare video, I've explained how to purchase a domain. It really takes 5 minutes. So if you have a domain in mind that you might like, why not just buy your own domain? You know, it could be from $18 all the way up to $100 a year, depending what it is. So now we've got the networking set up, we'll click done. Root password. You need to set a root password, of course. So make sure it's something secure. And we'll allow root SSH login with password. So that just means that we can use SSH like PuTTY, so we can connect through a terminal and maintain our server. And we'll click done. And for user creation, no user has been created. We'll actually make one. We'll make it an administrator. And the benefit of this when using Linux-based environments is because you don't want to always be logged in as root. It's not always the most appropriate way to use Linux. So you want another user that you can use for non-root privileges, and we'll just call it admin. Now in your scenario, you might want to use your name. That's up to you. We'll click done. We'll just have a quick skim over everything, make sure we're happy with it all. It all looks pretty good. You know, we've set our date and time. Mine's already correct, so yours should be too automatically. If not, fix it up. And click begin installation. So we'll basically wait for that to install, guys, and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay, so we finished the install. Now we'll reboot. So our server started up. It's all installed and ready, and we're good to go on installing freeipa. What I'll do is use putty to continue this so that we can have a better interface to copy and paste text, for example. So I'll close the VNC. And here we have putty. So we've started putty up and we've put our IP address for the server and click open. As you can see, it's asking us to trust it. We'll say yes. And we'll log in with our root credentials. So root, followed by your password. And you can see we're logged in again. So the first thing we want to do is open up some ports in the firewall, and this will allow freeipa to communicate freely and is part of the setup process. I'll put these commands down in the description. So that's our first one, and it's successful. The first one opens up the required ports, and the second one will make the changes persistent across reboots. Okay. And again, successful. So the next step is now to install the freeipa server. So yum install freeipa-server. And we'll just let that run. And that's complete. So we've run the first step. The next step now is we'll just quickly enable the cockpit for Fedora. Okay, so we've run the first command. Now the next thing we'll have to do is edit our host file. Now even though we've set the host name, and if I just type host name here, you see we've got our host name correct, so that's great. But we also need to change our host file. So if you type sudo nano, now nano is the application we want to use to edit, and that's actually just my favorite one to use, /etc/hosts. You can see here we've got a 127 address and we've got the IPv6 address underneath. So what you need to do is just press enter, drop it a line, and at the top we're going to put our server address. So simply just put the address that you assigned for your static address. So in our case it was 192.168.1.180. Press tab, and then you put your fully qualified domain name. So in our case it was ipa.ibracorp.org space and just the name of the server. So it was just IPA. Then we'll hit Control O to write that out, hit enter, and Control X. Now, because we've made that change, we'll just do a quick reboot. So just type in reboot. Apologies, sudo reboot. And we'll just give that a sec, shouldn't take long. So we'll just click restart session. It's going to ask us to log in again. So we'll log in as root. And we're logged in. Okay guys, so with all of that ready, we've made those changes, we've restarted our server. It's taken all of our changes that we've made. So now we can install and configure the freeipa server. So pretty simple. The next command we'll put in is ipa-server-install make home directory or mkhomedir and hit enter. And now it will take you through the configuration wizard. With DNS, which is the first question, it will basically be asking you if you want to configure integrated DNS. If you are using a setup like IBRACORP and you've been watching my videos, the DNS is currently being handled by Cloudflare. Okay, I like it handled at the Cloudflare level. I don't need a DNS server based here in the house. Now, if you are using this for a business service, you want to use your own DNS inside the home, you might want to configure that, in which case type yes. In my case, I'm going to leave it at no. But please remember, that's something that you'll have to make a decision on. The first time I tried to set up FreeIPA, I got held up quite a bit because I thought that I needed to configure DNS, but it is optional, guys. So in my case, I'm going to leave it at no. Anything in brackets that you can see, such as this here, is the default if you were just to press enter. So we're just going to hit enter. And now it's going to ask for your fully qualified domain name. Now, we already set that up when we started the server, so we're going to leave that as ipa.ibracorp.org. Hit enter. It's asking us to confirm it. We'll hit enter again. Then it's going to ask for the realm name, which is typically the domain converted to uppercase. Again, that looks correct. We'll hit enter. Now it'll ask you for a directory manager password. Now this is a password that has full access to your directory for system management tasks. So set a password. And now it'll ask you for an admin password, which is different to the directory. And now it'll ask you whether you want to configure Crony with NTP server or pool address. So I'm going to say no, I don't really need to configure it, but if you like, you can put an NTP server address, which is your time server. And that helps make sure the time is always maintained to a specific region. So I would recommend that you do it. In my case for this video, I'm just going to leave it at no. And I'll ask you to confirm all these details. So we've got our host name, our IP address, our domain name, and our realm name. It will configure certificates, which will be self-signed for that domain, and that all looks good. So we'll type yes and hit enter. Now while that's running, I'll actually show you guys the Fedora interface for accessing your server. So we configured that just before with that line and asked us to authenticate. So if you go to the server address with the port 1990, it will bring you to the Fedora interface here, which is pretty cool. So if I just log into that for you. So instead of, if you don't want to SSH or you don't want to go through the command line, you have this interface that we can now use. And you can get it to join a domain. You can check what it's doing. You can issue commands like shutting down and restarting. You can check its networking settings, storage, everything like that. Firewall, for example. And you can even go and configure software updates. So from here, you can just set automatic updates and upgrades. As you can see, it's checking for us now. And that just gives you a nice visual interface. So you can just dial in whenever you want and just have a quick look at what's going on. On top of that, it actually does give you a terminal interface right here. So, why wouldn't you use it? So I think it's quite handy, and I think it's quite useful to get a nice graphical view of what's happening on the server. Especially if you're someone that's not too strong with Linux. It does give you that option. You can also create user accounts. So we've got our 2 users there, for example, and any services that are running as well. So we'll just come back to our server now. And there you go, guys. It is now running. So we have IPA fully installed. Now that that's all done, we're ready to start accessing it from the web interface. Now you can follow and insert commands here in the command line, of course, but we're going to do it from the web interface just to show you what that looks like. There's a couple more settings that need to be configured, of course, so we can have it accessible. Now, I'll just pull over my Nginx proxy manager, and here we are. I'm going to just show you this really briefly, guys, because I've gone through it a lot of times now. If you don't know how to set this up, feel free to watch my videos. I've got one on Nginx proxy manager and one on Cloudflare. So I'm just going to show you this so you can copy your settings directly over. So we've configured a proxy entry here, ipa.ibracorp.org. I'll show you what that looks like. It is a HTTPS scheme, and it's forwarding to port 443. And that's because our server with FreeIPA automatically installs a certificate on there already. With our SSL, we have our SSL certificate, our origin certificate, and we're forcing SSL and the rest of it. Again, it's all in the Cloudflare video, so I'm not going to dig into it too far. Next is your DNS. So if you're using Cloudflare like I am, and this is the reason why we did not configure DNS in the install of FreeIPA, you need to make sure you have a DNS entry. So I've created a CNAME entry called IPA, and it's directing to our domain. And again, I've made a Cloudflare video, so you can watch that if you don't know how to do that. So now if we go back to Nginx Proxy Manager, and we click on IPA, sometimes I get this prompt. Now, if anybody knows why I get this prompt, let me know. I actually don't know why I get it, but I simply usually just click cancel and it will go away. And welcome to your FreeIPA web interface. From here, we'll pretty much just log in, and we'll log in using our admin credentials that we set up. And welcome. Now remember, this is usually very white, but I've got that extension on at the moment, the dark reader extension, so it makes it nice and dark. But this is your FreeIPA server, and it's running no problem. As long as your server stays up, you will have access to all of this. So I just want to be clear, guys, this application, this system is huge. There's a lot you can do in here, okay? Quite a bit, to be quite honest with you. But I'm going to explain one use case so that you can understand how to use it for that purpose, and I highly recommend you read up on the rest of it. Okay, there's extensive documentation on the FreeIPA website. But in our scenario, we want to talk about using this with Authelia. Okay, I'll quickly bring up the configuration file for Authelia just so we can get an idea of what that looks like. So as you can see in Authelia and on the website, if you watch my Authelia video, I have all the instructions and what to put in for the LDAP side of things. But you've got your LDAP URL, and this is what that looks like. So it's our URL that we configured for the, the IP address we configured for the server, our domain, what attributes it will pull, so the user ID, in this case it's admin, the additional users, so where to find users in FreeIPA. So this all is just filtering really. And these filters are related to FreeIPA. So Windows Active Directory will look different, for example. So for us, I mean, if you just wanted to make a user, you could just click add. Give them a logon name. So let's say test. Say first name is test as well. We'll call him testy. I don't know if that's a very attractive name, but we'll leave it at that. Then you have the group ID that that person belongs to. So they can be here. You would obviously create other groups that you wanted. In our case, we'll say he's an admin. And we'll give him a password. You can click add and edit. Now we've successfully created a user. That's pretty simple, right? We've got all the details here. If you scroll down, you can configure all sorts of stuff in here. So you can put their email address, and all of this information that you fill in can be pulled out for other applications that will use an LDAP backend. So if you're using something like Jellyfin, if you're using Organizer, which will be done in a future video, I'll show you all that. Authelia, you know, anything that allows a LDAP backend this is the information it will pull from, guys. So if you go to IPA-server, this is where most of the config is done for your base settings, for example. So you've got self-service permissions. If you go to configuration, so you've got your default email domain. So when you add a user, the default domain will be this one. You can change it. The default users group that they'll be added to. So, you know, if you really wanted, you could have admins. I really wouldn't recommend it. And you can pick all sorts of other default settings, you know, to make your life a little easier. I wouldn't mess with any of this until you sort of get your head around it. If you see a setting you're interested in, look it up, see what it does, see what impact it has. Configure it the way that works for you. You have these network services, you have authentication, you know, all these sort of stuff. Policies, again, we'll go back to policies. So your password policies, for example, there's only one at the moment and it's a global. And you can say, you know, I want a password to live for 90 days, at least 1 hour. You know, how many previous passwords can they have, etc., etc. Most users will probably need the identity part only. You know, they may not worry about anything else. I would definitely recommend using this. So with Authelia, you know, if you're using the LDAP backend, it will use their email address, for example, if they want to reset their password. And this is all secure, so this is all locked down. You know, it's all configured locally. In the case of Authelia, you don't need the fully qualified domain name. So after you're done configuring, for example, you could simply just disable the link. And in Authelia's settings, you would be using the local address, the local IP address, so that it can communicate with the freeipa-server without having a fully qualified domain name exposed. So that's freeipa, guys. That's installing it. It's pretty straightforward. At least it's straightforward when someone's showing you. It took me quite a while to get it working and work out all the kinks. But using our setup with Cloudflare, Nginx, using a Fedora server, you can see it's really straightforward and it's really easy to just have your own LDAP server. So why not go have a bit of fun, try it out, see if it works for you. If you have any questions, let me know. I have a live one that I use for my members of IBRACORP, and it's made my life a lot easier. You know, onboarding a member has become so simple, and yeah, it was worth every minute, really. So thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in to another IBRACORP video. I really appreciate you guys checking in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.